Easter, a tradition that needs to be changed.
Easter is celebrated all over the world as the resurrection of Jesus Christ. But have you ever considered that that may not be the best way to celebrate his resurrection? Let's start with the name, Easter. Where does that come from? Well, it's certainly not in Scripture. Nowhere, no how, no way. It was put in there in the King James Version when the people who translated the King James Version were more fearful of King James than they were of God. So that was a traditional word for Easter, so that's what they put in the King James Version, because they were afraid of King James. The word Easter really comes from a goddess for the spring and for fertility. And that's what I want you to see in this video, is that so many of the things that we celebrate, that we call Easter, are really nothing more than false gods who have crept into our Christian traditions. So Easter is one of them, the goddess of fertility and of springtime. Is that really what Jesus would like? I mean, if Jesus was sitting right next to you right now and you said, "Hey, we're having Easter, a celebration for you," he would wonder why you call it Easter, because he knows that's a goddess of fertility. So why would you bring a demonic entity into the celebration of Jesus? Anytime you give glorification to and praise to and use of anything demonic in your life as an accepting celebration type of thing, then you're actually giving credit and worship to demons, whether you know it or not. That's what you're doing. The demons are right there, willing and ready to accept your worship. And that's what's really going on. Well, consider that you have eggs in your celebration. What do eggs have to do with Jesus? Again, if Jesus were sitting right next to you, would you say, "Hey, we're celebrating your resurrection. Here, have a colored egg"? He would just look at you like, "What are you doing?" Well, eggs are a symbol of, you guessed it, fertility. Has to do with this goddess of fertility. And how about the baskets? What do you think baskets are? They are nests that you lay the eggs in. Again, fertility. And what about the rabbits? Well, those are symbols of fertility, because the rabbits are one of the most fertile creatures there are, because they are food to predators. So they populate rapidly and increasing numbers to repopulate themselves. So all of these things that we use to celebrate Easter are nothing more than praises to and glorification of fertility demons, fertility rituals that have nothing to do with Jesus. Now, let me ask you, don't you think that is like slapping Jesus in the face? That's the way I look at it. Hey, we're celebrating your resurrection. Smack. This is how we do it. And it's just an affront to him. It's an offense to him. Now, I know many of you are saying, "Well, we love Easter. We love to celebrate it that way. These are things we really like to do. And I feel close to Jesus when I celebrate Easter that way." Well, I would say to you that your feelings have nothing to do with it, because Easter is not about you. It's not about how you feel or what you think. It is supposed to be a glorification, an acknowledgement of Jesus' sacrifice and his victory over sin and death and hell and his resurrection from the dead. And it's about him, what he went through, his sacrifice, his torture, and how he came out on top as victorious. So it's not about you. It's not about what you like. Don't you think Jesus would say to all that, wouldn't you think he would say, you love your traditions, but the traditions of men negate the power of God? That's actually a verse. I'll put it up on the screen. Didn't he say that to all the Pharisees, that they have all these traditions, but they are not from God, that they just invented them themselves? Well, you won't find any bunny rabbits in Scripture or boiled eggs, decorated eggs. And I know people say that the egg represents his tomb. And, well, that would be like saying, hi, Jesus, we're celebrating your resurrection. Here, let me crack open an egg from you to celebrate your escape from the tomb, your resurrection from the tomb. Come on. It's silly to have these things that you think are wonderful and that you like. They are silly, unthinking, and unbelieving things about to be used in your celebration of Jesus. Has nothing to do with him. And some people say, well, the springtime means, new life. And these are things that Christians are dancing around, trying to come up with reasons that these things are okay. And most of them come from mythology. They come from false gods, which are really demons, and has nothing to do with Jesus. So come on. Can't we get past this? Can't we move on to celebrate the resurrection of Jesus in real ways that are meaningful to him? Did Jesus say anything about that? Well, he sure did. At the Passover, when he instituted the Lord's Supper, his very first words were, do this in remembrance of me. And then he had the Lord's Supper. Or maybe he said that afterward. I can't remember. I'll put it up on the screen. But he said that. He said, do this to remember me. If you want to remember me, this is what you do. Now, we have the Lord's Supper. We take the Lord's Supper at various times during the year. Some people take the Lord's Supper every Sunday. Some people take the Lord's Supper at home, which is fine. You should take it all the time. But Jesus said, this is what you do to remember me. Not boiled eggs, bunny rabbits, baskets or nests, and the word that comes from a fertility goddess. And what about chocolate? Okay, that came after the eggs because people were using these fancy colored eggs, and then a chocolate manufacturer, decided to start putting chocolate in the eggs. And basically, it was a way to sell chocolate, okay? It's sort of like the people buying and selling things in the outer court. Jesus actually made a whip. He didn't just pick up a whip. He fashioned a whip. It probably took him 2 to 4 hours to make this whip. So he knew exactly what he was doing and planned on doing. This wasn't a temperamental explosion where he whipped people and told them to get out of the outer court. He planned to do this for half a day. and made a whip. It's an offense to him. It's commercialization. And now we have all kinds of fancy clothes and hats that people want to wear. What in the world does that have to do with Jesus? Jesus was stripped naked on the cross and his torture and died naked on the cross. So if you wanted to celebrate with your clothing, you should probably just wear a simple white garment, which is called the garment of salvation, by the way. And everybody will be clothed with that in heaven, as well as robes of righteousness. So let's think about what we're doing. And I implore you and challenge you to change your church. If you're a pastor or a leader of some sort, an elder on the board maybe of your church, a teacher, maybe just a group of you in a home fellowship group, discuss this matter and decide we should try to get our church to change that. Yeah, you should. Let's honor Jesus. Let's lift up Jesus. Let's focus on him. None of these things have anything to do with Jesus' resurrection. I've been a part of 2 churches that have changed and done that. They were doing the traditional Easter, putting it in the bulletin as Easter, and they changed that. We just start calling it celebrating the resurrection of Jesus Christ. Been a part of 2 churches who changed that, and I had friends who were members of other churches that did that. So this is happening around the country. Churches are realizing that that does not honor Jesus, and they want to honor Jesus. So would you consider that? Would you consider changing your church to that? Would you do it for Jesus? Would you do it for your church? Would you do it for your fellow believers? Would you do it to be a witness?
Thank you for watching. Be sure to click on the logo to subscribe and then watch one of our other videos. Pass this on by sharing it with a friend.